Hey photo students, I am here on the North Shore and I am just going to do a little bit of a demonstration here about shutter speed. So for shutter speed, there are 4 big things I want you to know. That there's fast and slow shutter speeds. Within a fast shutter speed, you're stopping action and you're cutting back on light. And with a slow shutter speed, you are showing motion and you're adding more light in to a picture. So those are those 4 things. You've got adding in motion and adding in light with the slow shutter speed. And then you've got taking away light and stopping action with a fast shutter speed. So I'm going to be demonstrating those things using a setup here that I've got right next to some waves. And we're going to talk about how we can adjust the shutter speed and how that's going to affect how the picture looks. Alright, so here's the setup. We are right here on the edge of the lake and we've got some waves coming by. So I'm going to work you through fast shutter speed all the way into really slow shutter speed. So down here on the bottom of the screen, I'm going to click the shutter and I'm going to go up as fast as possible. One of the things you probably noticed as I did that is that the light got darker. Okay, the whole image got a little bit darker. So that means I've got to add in some light to balance exposure. So I'm just going to do that through my other 2 settings here until it looks like the picture is the brightness that it should be. Okay. So with the really fast shutter speed, 1/8000, let's take a picture here and we'll see how that looks. Those waves, you'll notice right in there are just frozen. That's one of the aspects of a fast shutter speed. So the faster you get, the more frozen things are. All right, so now I'm going to lower the shutter speed down a little bit here. Now I'm at 1/2500. So that's still a split second. I've got to balance my exposure again, so I'm going to reduce the amount of light with the ISO. Make the image a little bit darker. And then we'll take an image here and we'll take a look and see what those waves look like. Okay, so zooming in on those waves. Oh, they still look pretty well frozen there. Okay. As I start to go a little bit slower, like I'll go to 1/500 here, that's going to really start to make some motion be seen. Okay, so let's take another picture here. So as I zoom in on the water, it still looks pretty crisp, but things are going to start to get a little bit more blurred as we get even slower. So here it is 1/60. So you'll remember from class when we talked about 1/60, that is kind of the number you got to be concerned about for hand holding the camera. So I'll take another shot here. We'll do 2 there. I just had a wave come in. Now you're going to start to see those waves have a little bit more movement to them. Okay, they're not going to be completely frozen. So let's get even slower now. So we've kind of passed the point of hand holding the camera and I'm going to have to go towards my aperture now to start cutting back on light. So this is 1/15 of a second. Take another shot here. So here's what that one looks like. You're going to start to see a lot of motion in the water. Okay, the rocks are still in crisp focus. So let's slow it down even more. Let's go to 1/4 of a second here and see if we can cut back on light with our aperture to make that happen. There we go. So f20, let's get a big wave going here. I'm just going to take a few pictures here. All right, so 1/4 of a second. Take a look at that. We have got a lot of movement starting to show in our picture. Okay. The slower we get, the more movement we'll have. I've even got a little droplet of water on the lens there too, it looks like. So let's see how slow we can go while still having the light work out for us. So here's 1 full second. Let me get that droplet of water off the lens. I've kind of maxed out how dark I can make the picture with my other settings here. I'm gonna get another big wave in here. All right, so here we are. You'll kind of see that all the waves are pretty much blurred out in the image. Okay? So to summarize what we're learning about with shutter speed here is that different shutter speeds are going to have different effects on the pictures that you take. The faster the shutter speed, the more you're going to freeze action, so have less motion blur show up in the pictures. Like this image here, this is that 1/8,000 of a second shutter speed. You'll notice how the water is real crisp and frozen. That as we start to get a little bit slower on our shutter speed, here's an image at 1/2500th of a second, you'll start to see that motion a little bit more, blurred out. As I get slower and slower, you'll start to see it even more. So here's an image at 1/500th of a second. The bubbles are still pretty crisp, but they're starting to blur just a little bit. Zoomed in view here, this is 1/60. You'll see those bubbles are really blurred out, especially as the water starts to move through the rocks and get a little bit faster. Where it's not moving as much, you can still see the bubbles. Then as we move to even slower, so here's 1/15th of a second, all of the water is pretty much blurred to some degree. The rocks that aren't moving are frozen still. Get even slower here, here's 1/4th of a second. Now we're really starting to see a lot of that motion blur happen. All the way to 1 second in length. So here's the slowest shutter speed picture that we took in our example. Very blurred out. So again, shutter speed can affect light, so how much light comes into your picture, but it can also affect how motion is seen, whether it's blurred out or if it is stopped with its movement.